Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're waiting for Mr. Sutton. We hope he can get on soon. But in the meantime, I welcome to everyone to a conversation with Keith Sutton and Roxie Cash, sponsored by Great Schools in Wake. And with me tonight is Lynn Edmonds. Lynn is the Outreach Coordinator Director for Great Schools in Wake, as well as Public Schools First, children in the public school system, and now full-time education advocate. And of course, we have hopefully the Keith Sutton and Roxie will be joining us. And I'll go ahead and introduce Keith so that if he does show up, we can jump right into the conversation with him. But Keith has been on the Wake Board of Education since 2009. He's currently serving as chair of the board, and he was also chair earlier in 2013. Keith is the immediate past chair of the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board members, and he hopefully will be joining us any minute. And he's been pretty busy, he and Kathy Moore, doing the weekly updates every week at Wake County. If you haven't caught any of those, please go on the YouTube and search for Wake County. There he is. All right. And search for the Wake County Public School Systems channel, because there's some wonderful weekly updates that are there every week. Keith, I've already introduced you, but you can just wave and say hello. And Roxie's here also with us, and Roxie and her family moved here in 1985. She is a hospital pharmacist and has practiced mainly in the area of oncology. She has retired from Duke Raleigh after 29 years, and now she still works part-time at Wake Med North. Roxie is one of the hardest working women I've ever met. I've known her since the late 80s, and she was on the school board in 1991 through 1999, and came back at the urging of her friends and family and neighbors, and won election in 2016, and she's now serving with Keith as vice chair of the board. Roxie has 4 children. They all went through the Wake County school system, and now she's got several grandchildren who are joining that. So I'm going to, with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Lynn kick us off and to talk about some of the important issues facing Wake County right now.
You'll have to, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I want to share a reminder to use the chat box and put your questions into the question box. I will be monitoring those as we go along. We do not unmute our guests to ask their questions by sound. So if you'll please put your questions and comments into the chat box or the question box, I'll be sure to monitor those as we move along. Hopefully everyone attending saw the news on Monday that the county manager had released a budget proposal. That budget from the county is not final. It has not been approved or voted on. It is just a proposal right this minute, but it unfortunately did not meet the school system request of a $30 million increase. So we'd love to hear your comments, Roxie and Keith, on that and how you plan to move forward.
Keith, Roxie, you want to start?
Well, I mean, yes, we have a budget that's asking for more money based on the fact that we have a lot of legislative impact that will be hitting us, that we have to pay for through their local budget. And sadly, it doesn't come from the legislators, which it should come from, but the county has to pick that up. And of course, some charter school money that goes through. So the $29 million, at least 18 million of that is, or about 18 million of that was just to really keep us even. I mean, it's to keep our per pupil expenditure at what it's always been because of the amount of money we have to send out based on these mandates. So yes, we'd like to have that. We also know, though, I mean, I recognize that the county commissioners have have always been really good friends of us, and they've always worked real hard to help us. We've had a good relationship. And I know that this is a tough year with the COVID-19, and they are hitting sales tax losses considerably and all kinds of tax loss. So we all have to work together on this. Keith, if you want to say more on that?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it. The biggest part of the differences in the budget, main part was the legislative impacts, things such as rising costs for retirement, rising costs for health insurance was the biggest part of the increase. There were some other pieces around growth, and I think that's going to be our big challenge going forward. And then some money in there for to continue the salary increases that we had started for other employees, some of our classified employees. Now, much of that we know we can't do, at this point. You saw where the county was cutting about 100 positions. Most of those are vacant. Right now, we're hoping that we won't have to cut any positions. We don't foresee that right now. And obviously, it'll be a tough time to give salary increases when you have people losing their jobs. So we know that that's mostly off the table. I think our biggest challenge is going to be dealing with any potential growth that we're going to see, because we are a growing county. We grow new students every year. We are going to see new students in Wake County, both in Wake County and, as Roxie indicated, both in the charter schools. And that's important because even the money or funding that comes for those charter students comes through the Wake County budget. So even if our funding remains flat, and we see an increase in students, and right now those projections are about 1,000 students into Wake County. Again, not the Wake County Public School System, but just in Wake County schools, both Wake County Public Schools and the charters. And if our funding remains flat, then we essentially get cut. And so, our goal is to at least keep right now what our current per pupil expenditure is. We like to maintain that. So that's the goal, and we hope that we can negotiate to some degree with the county commissioners to keep that, as Roxie touched on, keep that per pupil spending constant.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, Yvonne. I just wanted to say, without question, the county is in a difficult position because of this economic downturn. I do want to make the point, just for historical perspective for our audience. In 2008, as a result of the Great Recession, Wake County and the Triangle area we still saw growth. Where many areas of the country, that didn't happen, Wake County still, certainly not at the clip that it had been prior to the recession. But if we use that as any kind of indicator, it is quite possible that even with the economic downturn, that Wake County will continue to see a lot of growth as what we're used to. I think we're the second fastest growing county in the United States. And no one can predict whether or not we will keep that exact slot. But it's important to remember that during the Great Recession and after the Great Recession, the Triangle area and Wake County continued to grow, unlike other parts of the country. So we need to be mindful of that. Yvonne, go ahead.
I want to just add 2 quick points to that, Lynn, and to what Keith is saying. 2 points. One is that a report did come out today showing that where we've been growing at about a 4% rate and each year in Raleigh, and even with all of these downturn indicators, they're predicting that we will still have a 2.5% to 3% growth next year. Yeah, and these are the economists with all their little magic formulas, but that's to Lynn's point that we're going to move forward. And Keith, I would just say this to you, what you said about the per pupil growth. That's always been something that the commissioners historically have always done. Now in 2006, 8, 10, 12, as Lynn's saying, that agreement was broken. And there were many years where the county commissioners did not provide at minimum the per pupil growth. And that really hurt Wake County. You got behind. Now, starting in 2014, every year since then, the commissioners have given you at least per pupil growth. So I think it's important for the listeners to understand that that has been a gentleman's agreement, if you would, that we try to at least accommodate growth, because that's something you cannot control as a school board. So thank you.
And I'll just add to Lynn's point, you know, pre-recession, when we were in the technology boom, we were growing at a couple of years, 5,000 to 6,000 students a year. And when the recession hit, that slowed to about 3,000. We were averaging about 3,200 students a year during the recession. So even during that time, Lynn is right that we were still growing by significant numbers, by any school district numbers. 3,000 students is a lot in 1 year. And it is reasonable to expect that we will continue to see an increase in students in the next year or two, even if we plunge into a recession, which is likely.
Well, and for perspective, even if we get the 1,000 students and it's only 1,000, that's still a couple of elementary schools, or 1.5, maybe 1 3/4 elementary school, you know, or half of a high school. You know, to put it in perspective, it's a significant number of students. Yvonne, did you want to ask about the CARES money, or
Yes,
wait, or put that for later?
That would be, let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit overall for next school year. When you're looking at these budgets that we're talking about, and we've already talked about when I did that calculation, Lynn, to look at what those new students would bring, it's $12 million just for per pupil growth. And adding in what Mr. Sutton said for the extra costs that are pushed back to the county for retirement health care costs, it would bring it up to 18 million. But the CARES money, we understand we want to understand more about that. Like, well, how much money does the county think that they're getting? How much money will Wake County schools get of your own directly? And how will this be used to kind of help us look at next school year?
Sure.
Well, I know the county got $194 million, and it was actually a direct deposit. It wasn't an application. They got it directly. They already have it in hand. And that's the CARES money that they've gotten. The school system gets, I believe, Keith, what, $24.5 million, but we actually have to have an application for that, which we're doing, of course, and it doesn't come as a direct deposit. It comes to us, and it will come to us. Stipulations, of course, on how you spend it is a little tighter for the school system. We've got a few more stipulations than the county does, but the county has a bigger job, of course, of using that money all across the county. Seems like a lot of money, but with all the things that we've had to do, I think we saw not long ago the expenses that we had extra for COVID versus the savings, and Keith can talk a little more about that because he was on the news about that. We had savings, of course, with fuel costs and things for closing schools, but our expenses at least doubled what our savings were. So with the things that we've had to do with the technology, especially the one-to-one devices that we've had to get out there and all the hot spots, and the food and nutrition, and not having any money coming in on that, many different things, and expecting, of course, that we're going to have a lot of psychological, social things that we're going to have to deal with when students come back from being like away from our relationships in our schools. We've got a lot of things that are hit us, and those are all things that we can take out of CARES, whether it be some of our psychology efforts, our nursing efforts, sanitization of our schools, things like that. But that's also things we can get we will be asking for money as well to help with that from our county commissioners out of their pot of money.
And we want to talk about that a little bit more, about things that impact reopening, but we want to probably put that to the end and let Lynn talk a little bit more about this whole budget process, because we're getting, people are asking her a lot of these questions, like how does this process work?
So
The
we're
budget
going to
process?
share with the audience a little later the timeline. I don't know if, you can give us the timeline that you know of, but I did want to ask you, Mr. Sutton, if if there's an opportunity, or if you know yet when your staff, when Wake County staff might have a budget work session now that the county proposal has been released, or is, because I noticed that you all did not, of course, not that there was a lot of time, it's 24 hours later that the school board had your meeting, your work session and your meeting yesterday, and there was not a budget presentation at that time. Do you have a budget work session coming up? Or
We don't have a date set yet. I do think that there will be some opportunity where both boards, or the leadership of both boards, at a very minimum, get together to have some discussion around that. If that will be one that's a public session, I'm not sure yet, but there will be some time and opportunity where both boards get together to hammer out some of the details. And I don't suspect that we're very far apart. Again, I think we understand again where we are right now and what we're facing. But I do hope and feel certain that there'll be an opportunity to talk a little bit about the per pupil piece. I do know too that between the CARES money that we receive and the CARES money that the county gets, there'll be some workaround, I think, with that as well. I think the challenge for the county is that they can't use their CARES money to replace lost revenue. In the last meeting that I heard that we met with the leadership. Now, again, those things are changing almost daily, but right now that poses some challenge for them in terms of how they spend theirs. But I think frees and provides more opportunity to allow us to spend some of that. Mm-hmm. And so I do think there'll be an opportunity and some requests coming from us to request some of their CARES money as well, in addition to the $24.4 million that Roxie mentioned that we're getting from the Education Stabilization Fund as well.
And Yvonne, is it the next slide where you have the dates for the commissioners?
No, but
this one, yeah. So we know the commissioners have a couple of work sessions between now and they vote on June 15th. So what you see on your screen now, and this is for our attendees, is that starting tomorrow, there should be a portal on the commissioner or the wake.gov website. It's not the commissioner's website, but the county website for the public to make comments about the budget. We certainly encourage all of our attendees and our followers on social media and our supporters to please make comments on the budget using that portal on the wake.gov site. We will share that link as soon as it is live, and it starts tomorrow. So when we get that link, we will share that on social media. But there is opportunity for the public to be engaged, and for Ms. Cash and Mr. Sutton, how can we help? What would be helpful from the public to help you in this process?
I think any advocacy is appreciated. Again, we understand what the county is up against, and that they're looking at requests probably from a number of departments. We're not asking for any new or expansion money or anything, but just we would appreciate some consideration. I think again for the growth in new students. I think we're opening one new school. Is that right, Roxie? I'm opening one new school this year. Mm-hmm. So that request I think is a reasonable one in terms of some consideration for the growth in new students and the opening of one new school. And again, the flat funding would essentially be a cut to what we're receiving if you look at the growth in new students.
Have you submitted your CARES request to the county yet?
Not yet.
Okay. When that's, I'm sure that'll be public at some point, right? That request. Following up on Lynn's question, could this opportunity to comment on the budget include support for CARES allocations? or maybe an opportunity for parents to express their interest in certain things being funded out of CARES money?
I think, again, anything is appreciated. I can tell you that the CARES money, the CARES request that we'll make will fall into 3 buckets, if you will. Cleaning of schools, particular one where we need to do some deep cleaning of schools, replacing PPE and things of that nature, social emotional well-being of students, the hiring of nurses, counselors to help with any additional trauma that we see students experiencing, and then the 3rd bucket to be around technology, replacing some of the laptops and devices and hotspots that we purchased. So I can tell you that our request will fall into those 3 buckets. I don't see, again, where there will be, and obviously they may have some questions about how we're spending the 24.4 that we're receiving, and if we're asking for additional money from their CARES money, they'll want to see how that's going along. And so again, in any requests or thoughts from the community about that would be appreciated. And I think if they can be targeted to some of those areas and consideration around those areas would be helpful.
Keith, I'd like to just share with you and Roxie, I've been on 3 or 4 calls the last week with teachers, educators and teachers who've had, like we're doing tonight, kind of town halls and conversations and talking. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they wanted me to promise to say to anybody who would listen is, as you get ready to look at these contracts or ways to bring in the helping professionals into our schools, a lot of teachers are saying, don't forget the retired teachers, retired nurses, and retired social workers who, because they felt like that was a good way to create jobs, because the Wake County Public School System is a job creator. In fact, the largest job creator almost, if not the largest right now in the county, it's one of the top 2, maybe 3. And so they were saying, they were concerned that there might not be, one of the folks had said there might not be enough of these people. And they were saying, well, because the hospitals are hiring too. And they said, oh, but there's a really great in this area amount of retired teachers, retired educators, and nurses who would come back on a short-term contractual service to help us get more people in the building. So I like that you're talking about your 3 buckets, and I think parents, when they're communicating with the commissioners, could and should, my view, speak up on behalf of those 3 buckets. They sound like what Lynn and I have heard parents talking about. They're worried about the cleaning, and are the bathrooms going to have hot water, running water? Are there going to be dispensers in the hallways like at hospitals to get sanitizers? Are there going to be hand washing stations? So they're very concerned about those and very concerned about the helping professionals. Lynn, should we go on? Anybody, Roxie, do you and Keith have anything else for Lynn to say about the budget? I don't want to jump to my next slide here and overstep comments.
Well, I do want to say that we got to remember that this CARE monies is a one-time expenditure. So if we put a lot of money that goes into that's a one-time expenditure. So I don't want it to take away from our budget request, because that's a reoccurring expenditure. So I think the contracted nurses and contracted health professionals and teachers is a good idea to use contracted service, but it may look like a lot of money, $24 million, to try to catch up and do some really good things to keep our schools safe and clean and secure, but it's a one-time expenditure, and it doesn't mean we will get that again next year.
I think that's a good point for the public to understand, and it's a challenge for next year, right? Once you get these things done. Well,
I'd like to add something, unless Keith has some comments. I'd rather him go first.
No, I just add, I think Roxie made an excellent point that money can't supplant, normal operations and that sort of thing. It's one time now, we could see another round of money coming from the federal government. that could be added as an aid package. And we do have till September of 2021 to spend that money. So it's not like it has to be spent by the end of this fiscal year, or quite frankly, next. We've got to September 21. So we've got a while to spend it. But Roxie is exactly right. It is one-time money and does not support, or would not support, recurring costs.
I just wanted to say I did listen in on the work session yesterday, and you had a presentation from the facilities department, and something with regard to the cleaning of schools and opening schools back and what that will look like and what that will mean as far as the facilities themselves and cleaning. The staff mentioned that they didn't want to get too far ahead with buying various products or supplies until the state provides a little bit more guidance on what exactly they should buy and should have in every classroom or every hallway or every piece and part of a school building. And I thought that was probably a very wise decision, is to wait to get a little bit more guidance from the state on that.
That's true, and I'll be honest and speak personally. It is wise on one hand and sometimes frustrating on the other to have to continue waiting for that guidance. I think there's part of us that I think there's a fine line between being proactive and being responsive. And so there are times, I think, when and you may see us push a little bit ahead in making the decisions, and what will, I think, be prudent on our part is to create a number of scenarios so that if the state goes in one direction, we've got a response and a plan already in place. If we suspect that they may go in another direction, we've also got a plan or measures in place to respond to either scenario A, scenario B, or even a scenario C. But I do think that some of the things that we're talking about, putting up hand washing stations, sanitizer safe stations, again, at entrances, at restrooms, cafeterias, those sort of things, having hand washing stations and pumps in a number of places, even if you have them in some way on our buses. I think those would be wise investments that will go a long way, even beyond as you get past that, because I do think that one of the things that will keep us safe down the road is that we adopt many of these practices now as ongoing and long-standing habits. That's how I think one way in which we fight this pandemic and this disease.
Keith, when you said that, I had to give you thumbs up because I watched the video this morning from Canada where they've started back in a few places. And one of the things that they do when you get on a school bus is they have a little dispenser there, and they take a squirt, wash their hands, and sit down. And they also have a pick up a mask. If you don't have a mask, you pick one up when you get on the bus. And they're just little disposables. And so that was, I thought, kind of cool. And I just will add this one thing that I saw from this film too, that they're spending a tremendous amount of time the first couple of weeks of schools talking to kids and explaining to them, making sure they're okay. And talking to them about why are we wearing these masks, and this is how we look now, and this is how we're going to do things. And I think I really appreciate, Keith, that the whole school board is really focused on, we can't just walk in the door and everybody sit down and do their math. We have to walk in the door and help them. I came to a work site myself this week wearing a mask, and other people wearing a mask, and it felt odd for a few hours. It was very odd, and I can't imagine what our kids feel like. So thank you for doing that. Lynn, you were at that work session yesterday. A couple of the questions we've gotten, and I don't know if this is the right time, but a lot of people wanted to know a little bit more about these calendars. I think that was on the work session yesterday.
Do you want?
Yeah, basically they were saying, the comments we heard were, can you talk a little bit about how they're going to work and when we're going to start? And they were saying very positive things. They really were saying this is great for the multi-track. They really seem to like it. We got a lot of comments on Facebook, and so for people who didn't get to see that work session, could you just maybe do a quick highlight of the budgets calendars you're proposing and when you might be voting on those? Parents seem to really want to have information. When are things starting? How are we going to work? And the calendars were very popular. I think y'all had a huge attendance yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah, we had more than we could handle, right?
Yeah.
I tried to get on, I couldn't get on. So Lynn got an early seat, so she was there. So maybe if you could just do
well over 1,000.
a little highlight of those calendars, that would be great. And this is being recorded, so once we get done tonight, we will post this on Facebook and YouTube, and people can come back and listen in.
And I'm sorry, Yvonne, I'm having trouble viewing the questions. So I was over here trying to fix my box here.
Well, I mean, I'll just start a little bit. I for some reason can't get the calendars pulled up in front of me, but maybe Keith has them. But the calendars, I think, have been, of course, they've been a big question, and they're not an easy answer because we have a lot of restrictions by the state that hopefully this might be a time during the pandemic that that everybody will learn that flexibility in a calendar is a very important thing for a school system to have, especially when we have different calendars. But the fact that we're going to go ahead and start all of our schools in August, with the year-round beginning August 3rd, I think, is it? August 3rd?
That's the date for year-round.
Yeah, August 3rd for the single tracks, modified calendars, and multi-track schools, and that has given us what I have actually gotten a lot of feedback on our year-round multi-track calendars, as that with some extension of the day, we're able to do pretty much keep our tracks similar to what they had before. There's definitely some changes, but pretty similar to what they had before, which I think is pretty amazing since we're starting a month early, but we've extended the day 15 minutes. So I think that the calendars look really good, and I know that we can't have everything we need in it, but I think we've done a really good job of doing that. And Keith, you can add on to that. I can't pull the calendar up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You know, what has happened is with the General Assembly, setting the days now in terms of when we can start, being August 17th, which is a week before the original start to school. And we cannot be in school past June 11th, I think is the date. And so being that we're sort of in between those two goalposts, if you will, and trying to get in the days of instruction, it's made it a little difficult for the year-round calendars. The General Assembly has now given a definition to a year-round school and what that means, which has made that a little bit challenging for us for some of our calendars. That until now, that definition was a fairly loose one, but now it's a little bit more restrictive. And so how we get the number of days that are required, the number of hours in that are required based on those two start and stop dates, it now changes and affects the teacher work days, it affects the holidays. We've had to add 5 virtual learning days. And so now it's been a shuffle game for us to try to now fit all of our calendars into what feels like a little bit tighter box, if you will, and make it all work. And I think our staff has done an amazing job in making that work in a way that that the calendar, you know, given the constraints that we have, they've done an amazing job to help us get there. So that's sort of the long and short of sort of where we are, what we've been dealing with, and where we stand now.
Well, Keith, can this new calendar starting on the 17th of August, does that allow high schools to have exams before the Christmas break or the holiday break?
I don't think so yet.
Yeah.
You think it does? I don't think we quite made that cutoff yet, but I'm not sure.
Okay, and that was just one of the questions yesterday on Facebook that some folks were asking. And then, you know, I will say that, you know, the calendar looked great to me. In fact, Keith and Roxie, it reminded me of the original calendar we had in year round, where we used to close the schools down in July and clean them and have a break in between year round stopping and starting again. And that before we had the General Assembly change when you could control your own calendar. So I thought this was very reminiscent of a calendar that really works much better for families and teachers and gives principals a break and everything else. So I thought that was really good. So I can commend y'all on those calendars. I did have two questions yesterday. Somebody wanted to know what, there were a couple categories. One is a remote learning day, and there was another one called a calendar day.
It's called a calendar out day, and that was a new terminology for everybody, because we don't do it like, we tried to not do something that would confuse the multi-track, I believe, the multi-track schools. And so I've actually got something in front of me because that question came up a couple times to me, and Wade Martin just explained that was a non-paid school closure day for the 10 and 11 month staff, and that only 12 months staff report to school on those days, kind of like a track out day that you would use in a multi-track year round, but we're trying to use the language of calendar out because it's not confusing to multi-track parents. So that is one that came up. And what was the other one you said? The
remote learning days. A lot of people haven't caught that terminology yet. What does remote learning days mean? Are they optional, not optional?
They're not optional. Are they key? I mean, this is a legislative, no, I wouldn't say mandate, but a legislative direction that they've given us for the 5 remote learning days. Keith, you want to talk more about that?
Every district now will have to have at least 5 remote learning days. So these would be days where, just like we're doing now, where remote learning is taking place at home, school is out, and we're actually using those as a remote learning day.
Okay. Well, that probably brings us to the almost here at the end, so we can allow some time for some questions for everybody. But, you know, we want to kind of go back to that conversation we had with y'all sometime a couple weeks ago, kind of seeing where everything is now. You know, we're two months out now, and, you know, throw all these out to you, answer to any of these things, but, you know, summer opportunities, what about phase 2? The governor just announced today that runs through June 22nd. Can we use the CARES Act money for summer school? Can we use it to remote learn during the summer for kids who are wanting to get caught up? What kind of share with the audience whatever you want on this topic of how we're doing, have things gotten better, where are we going for the next 2 months?
I'll start and Roxie jump in. You know, update in terms of 2 months out. I think the learning is as a whole is going well. I think the biggest challenge for folks right now is still one, the engagement. We're seeing the connectivity, and I think we've connected with most students. We've done a great job of getting devices out. We're still not seeing the engagement of all students where we would like for it to be. That remains a challenge. And I think for those that are really engaged, the challenge is sort of screen time and screen burnout, and just the social, emotional, and mental health of our students, especially our younger students, kindergartners, first grade, the younger elementary students who have the shorter attention spans, who you know, find it challenging to sit at a computer screen for 2 or 3 hours. And you know, we still say, you know, that online learning, virtual learning does not, should not, cannot take the place of actual physical learning in a school, face-to-face learning in a school. We don't expect parents to emulate that at home. And when you see the mental fatigue set in, the social emotional fatigue set in, you know, give students time away, give them a break, let them go out to play or run and get some exercise. But remote learning is not meant to be 5-6 hours at home in front of a computer for 5-6 hours all day. The CARES money can be used for summer school. I don't think we're at that point yet in terms of the social distancing and that sort of thing. So I think we'll continue to watch and monitor the guidance coming from the governor's office and our Department of Health and Human Services. If you got a chance to see the 6:30 news tonight, I heard our state superintendent say that he felt pretty confident that we would be back in school in August. That they've got a task force is working on that, and so we'll be eagerly awaiting some of the response from that and seeing what the social distancing will look like. We're all concerned and asking the same questions, wondering the same things. Will we see students come to school on staggered days or in different groups? Students eating lunch in the classroom instead of in the cafeteria? Will athletics participate? What that will look like? Athletics perhaps probably with no fans in the stands, so to speak. So a lot of questions, still up in the air about just what school will look like when we return.
So now that we have this phase 2, which looks like it didn't change a lot for the school system from what you're saying. So, and it goes through the end of June, and if things move as we hope they will, then phase 3 looks like it'll be something similar with 2 or 3 weeks of phase 3 before schools can open. Is that kind of indicate that any summer opportunities would have to totally be remote and or be in July? Is that kind of where we're boxed in at?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Roxie.
Well, I don't know that we're boxed in. I mean, Keith can add to that. I don't know if we're boxed in, but just as a realist, and I work in the healthcare profession, I think that we need to pretty well assume that our summer months will be remote. I would like to think that we're planning that direction. I think that's the safest thing to do, and I think it keeps everybody feeling a little safer about everything. But I mean, I don't know that, and Keith, you can add if any later discussions have happened. What I'm seeing is our teachers are becoming much more used to doing online learning. I know not everybody has this down. I think some of them have done dramatic things that I just am amazed at when I watch some of the things they're doing from classrooms or for their classrooms. But I think everybody's getting easier with it. I think it's becoming better. It's our public schools that online learning is the focus of what we do, but we have to also remember that all of our teachers have little kids at home too, that they're trying to take care, and they're in the middle of learning as well. But I don't, and Keith, you can add more. I don't feel like summer is going to bring a lot of change as far as us being able to go into the buildings and do much as a group.
Okay.
Well, based on what we heard today, with the modified phase 2, we're at least 5 weeks or so away from entering the next phase. That will put us at the end of June, 1st of July. So anything that I think happened during the summer is almost pretty safe to say it would be remote at best. And if there's anything that's offered shortly after that time, even as you get to August, we might be talking about, even an option for parents, because the question will be, no matter what we're doing, how comfortable will parents feel sending their children to school? I think that would be the ultimate question. And there may be some. I got an email today that asked us not to send kids back to school until we either have a vaccine or an effective treatment.
That's not the near future. Yeah.
That's not the near future, but that's a real feeling and concern that some parents have. And so if that's how parents are feeling, then if they don't want to send their students to school, will that student be penalized if they don't come to school? Do we offer some sort of opt-out or option for those who still don't feel comfortable? And the same for our teachers and other employees. If they don't feel comfortable coming into the building because they have compromised immune systems or what have you, do we offer them an option if they don't? So again, a lot of questions that we gotta sort of figure it out and answer, but those are the kinds of issues that we're thinking about and that are, coming to our attention.
Before we move to the next slide, I do see that there's a question. Somebody wanted to know what percentage of students in this are attending school right now at the middle and high. They're saying that their 8th grader is averaging 8 of the 27 kids in any Google Classroom, while their elementary kid is 26 out of the 28 are participating. So they're just asking if you have a rough idea of what's going on in the middle and high school for participation.
Again, I think the older students are better equipped, so to speak, have a longer attention span, and so I think now did you say what? Give me those numbers again. The 26 out of
She was saying that her middle school kid is in the 8th grade, and that when in those Google Classrooms, there was only like 8 or 9 kids that show up out of the 20. But elementary, the participation rate is very high. It's 26 out of the 28 are showing up. And so they were just wondering, is this kind of the trend across the county that middle schools and high schools are having a harder time engaging the kids?
I'm not sure if that's the trend. I've not seen the numbers across the county. I would imagine much of that has to do with parent engagement and parent responsibility. And where you've got the younger students and the parents sort of ensuring that students are online and logged in, whereas your older students, while you would think that they may have their own personal responsibility to log on, you don't have the parent that's pushing them and making sure that they're logging on and they're engaged and connected.
Lynn, did you want to go ahead and see if we can answer a few more of these questions before we do our wrap-up slide?
I do want to say though on this is I don't know if we'd have an average, but I do know that the school system and the area superintendents are watching with their principals very closely the engagement in every school. So every school knows how many kids have not logged on or who's logging on regularly. So it's being watched. It's just very individualized.
So one question here is, something we touched on earlier. They're asking, what about transportation? They're really concerned about how we're going to handle transportation. Do you have anything else to add than what we talked about earlier? Are you going to get more buses, more bus drivers? Or are you going to be?
I don't know where we're going to get more bus drivers. If I knew that, we would have done that a long time ago. I think it's going to be similar as it was. That's our expectation, and I will take safety precautions. We'll treat the bus driver. Is that what they mean, like the starting of the school in August?
Well, I think it's an issue of some buses are very crowded, and so children would not be able to socially distance or even sit one to a seat, honestly, just because some buses are pretty crowded. And I think a lot of parents are wondering how in the world we're going to manage that.
Well, we're not going to let that happen, I'm sure. Whether that means kids come in at different times. If you talked about, Keith may have talked about that. I know we might bring our kids in on opposite days and half sessions, so that might take care of some of that. But
okay, and
then real quickly, Keith, you touched on this a little bit about how school will look very different, and we don't want to. We want to try to work in an opportunity for people that don't feel, whether it's staff or students, if they don't feel safe coming to school, they don't have to come to school, or making allowances for that. But for the new academic year, 2021, we had a question here about how remote learning will be incorporated with grading. And you may not know that yet, but that's one of the questions is how will grades reflect the very many dynamics of people's remote learning experience?
Yeah, we really don't know the answer to that one just yet. I talked a little bit about last week the possibility of forming a task force or working group that will look at what school will look like as we move forward and reopen, and that would be one of the big questions on the table. Is that if we go into the new year, the new academic year, and we're still doing virtual learning, what grading will look like. But right now,
I imagine that would also be something the state board would have to provide quite a bit of direction on.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's another comment I just want to share. It's not really a question. I'm trying to look through here really fast. Lynn and I both are toggling back and forth here. One of the things that people are concerned about is wanting the community to have input, wanting teachers and educators to have input into however we do this. And the comments here are thank you that you're listening. Very positive comment because you mentioned that you're thinking about what about kids who don't want to come about, what about teachers who don't want to come about, and staff. So the comments are really thank you for listening and gathering that information, and in general I would say encouraging you to continue to do that, to make sure that the community, parents, grandparents, educators have some input. Caretakers is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Caretakers have input. Lynn, do you see any other outstanding question?
I don't, but I feel like we have a couple more slides that.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, you're right. So we're going to move on. And some of these questions I've summarized in really big ways. And folks that are listening, if you felt like your question isn't answered, and you'll email at info@greatschoolsandwake.org. We'll get those questions and we'll get answers and we'll put them, we'll shoot you an email back. Okay. So we will try to get questions if we miss something that you think is important. So Lynn and Roxie and Keith, this slide is asking you to give you a chance to talk about where we are right now. Y'all been doing some fabulous things.
Well, we're excited about where we are with, I guess we're talking about the next slide here, the closing of school and graduations.
Yes,
We're excited about where we are. We think we have found sort of a happy medium, if you will, for everyone. We've received a lot of positive comments and folks seem both thankful and relieved that there'll be some sort of celebration at each of our high schools. We'll be doing a virtual video graduation that will provide a consistent recognition, if you will, across all the high schools. And then, as you know, allowing each high school to have its own sort of tailored, a customized celebration, which the principal and their teams will set the date and what that event will look like. Now, that might range from celebrations on the football field or stadium to perhaps celebrations in the parking lot. It will involve students wearing their caps and gowns, being able to turn their tassels, being able to hear their name called, being able to walk across some sort of stage. Those are the things that they told us that they wanted to try to do, and we're trying to make some accommodations to do. And I think the last piece is allowing also for some of the local traditions that are part of each high school, for them to honor those as well. You heard mention in last night's meeting, Broughton High School, and the students there have a tradition of signing the bell in the Broughton Bell Tower. They'll be allowed to do that, and other schools that have similar traditions. So we think this is a win-win that allows each student and school community, not each student, but each school and each school community to plan and tailor a graduation ceremony that fits their traditions, their community, and their facility, along with making sure that some of the more traditional parts of graduation, the pomp and circumstance, the speeches, the commencement addresses, will all be part of the virtual video celebration.
And our school assignments done for the year. I know that y'all been having the process of people applying and you've gone through hearings and those kind of things. So one of the things that is pretty much that process done for the year.
We're still working on those. We're still having meetings and working on addressing assignments for the 2020-2021 year. So they're not done. We're still working on those. And I will mention that part of your slide, you mentioned graduations for kindergarten, 5th, and 8th. We honestly have not talked much about those. Most of the focus, quite honestly, has been on our seniors. But I think when we've talked about the schools and the principals planning those celebrations, we didn't limit those to the graduations of seniors. And so I would imagine that what has been discussed in those principal meetings is that if they feel, some move to create a graduation again for their 8th graders or 5th graders or even pre-K students, those principals have the same flexibility that the high schools have as well in planning something.
That is really good to know because, all those transition years, right? When you leave your elementary school and go to middle school, and you leave middle school and go to high school, it's nice if there's something, and I'm sure our principals are thinking about it, that would give parents, even like you said, Keith, a photo op where you're, in the athletic field or the football field.
Well, I think teachers want closure too with some of their kids they've had all through elementary, and principals do. So I know a lot of them are anxious to see their 5th graders or their 8th graders again. Our principals are. So I think they'll figure out something creative.
And I would just encourage parents, listeners, contact your principal. If you have not heard anything yet, contact the principal. They'll be working on setting dates. They need to hear from you. They want to hear from you. So reach out to your principal if you have not already.
That is really
quickly, Mr. Sutton, we had a comment here. I know the answer because I've seen the one of the work sessions. I know y'all discussed this. There's a concern about the devices that have been given out, say from a particular school, that those devices are now out of that school building and have been distributed. And this person is wondering, what happens to those devices? Will they be replenished at the school level, et cetera? Can you speak a little bit about that?
So the CARES money that we'll be getting and that we may also get from the county will be used to replenish the devices that we're taking out of the schools to give to students. So we don't anticipate that we'll be asking for devices back from students. They would essentially get to keep those. What we have not figured out in terms of how we might repair, refurbish devices if a student drops a device or something. I understand that many of them are very well protected in terms of the cases that they're coming in, but I would imagine that if you drop it the right way or crack a screen, that still can happen. So we have not quite figured out yet what to do with regard to repairs. But in terms of replacing the ones that were in the buildings by next school year, I think all those devices will be replaced with brand new ones.
Thank you.
And so then this is kind of our last slide, and we may have a few minutes left after that for questions. And so now some of these things, Chair Sutton and Vice Chair Cash, we've already talked about. The beginning dates, that was a calendar question, I think, Lynn, in terms of August 3rd, the multi-track and the modified year, and then August 17th is the start date. And so in general, anything else you can add about any of these concepts? Because one of the things that the questions that Lynn and I are getting daily on social media is wanting to know about what does deep cleaning mean, and then what does every day, every week cleaning like? What are you thinking about? We know you don't have all the answers, but what would happen in terms of staggered attendance? How would that happen? And parents are concerned about how do they return to work if their kids are only going to school half a day? How does that work? And then their parents have been saying to us, how can we use any of this money to really improve nutrition? And this really says, can we have universal breakfast and lunch is what they really are asking. We've been spending a lot of time feeding families and children, and we haven't asked them if they qualify for a free or reduced lunch. We haven't made them pay co-pays. We've let people who show up to want to eat. And they're saying, is there any space in this new reopening of schools where we can have grab and go breakfast for any who want it, or grab and go lunch for any who want it? Can we somehow help with nutrition, and then of course social emotional learning? So I just throw that there.
I would like to say something quickly about the nutrition. I do think that is one thing we need to do a really good job of when we come back, because there's been a really good job done on it by our CNS people trying to keep up with that, and people in our school system identifying more and more people that need this help of kids. Therefore, we have a good network of knowledge now that I don't think that we totally had before. We had a good network. But the grab and go, I think we're going to find, number one, is a good, safe way of doing our nutrition, and universal breakfast and lunch to me is very important for kids. I really think it is. I know universal breakfast is important to me, but the grab and go, some of our schools have done that for a while, and I'm hoping we'll do that more and more. So the cleaning, I feel very good about the seriousness that's been put into our thoughts about cleaning. And again, I work in a hospital. We've learned a lot of things in the hospital that, even as far as like stations, you don't want a few stations. You have to have a lot of stations, because you don't want people congregating around a hand sanitation station. That's just about as bad as not having one. But a lot of things that we'll learn, I think the cleaning is going to be done really, really well. And I think we're going to put a lot of time into it and doing it more often all week long. And the staggering entrance, you could talk, I know some of this is going to be done in that task force that you're talking about, Keith, that will probably get input.
Yeah. I think with the cleaning, most of the buildings, since they've been closed now since March, have been cleaned. I think that the bigger questions will, come in terms of, again, when we're back in school, what the cleaning will look like and what sort of schedule. Obviously there'll be sort of, will there be, for example, a wipe down of doors and surfaces nightly, and some sort of deep, more intense cleaning on the weekends, or disinfecting, or coming with the foggers and that sort of thing over the weekend, or does that happen nightly? And again, what costs are associated with that? I think those are the kinds of questions that we'll be faced with as we open up around cleaning. When you think about the staggered attendance, some of our high schools now are on, what we call the A-Day, B-Day. For example, Enloe does that, and so we have the same sort of an A-Day, B-Day, where again, half of the school comes on one day, half the school comes on another day. One example I heard is that half of the group come on Monday, Wednesday. The other half of the students come on Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday would be an all-day work day for teachers. Is one scenario I've heard. That one sounds interesting to me. That I heard that from another district, but that has some appeal to me. So I think there are a number of really unique and interesting scenarios that we're here about how we stagger attendance. That would answer your question, Lynn, about the buses. We wouldn't necessarily purchase, I've not heard any conversation about purchasing new buses or hiring more drivers, but if you only have half of your students not coming to school, then you would have only a half or fewer on your buses. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see more carpoolers as we go back into school during that time. Nutrition, two things I'll say about that. One, by the end of this week, we will have fed over 1 million students, about over 1 million meals to students by the end of this week. And so what we've been able to stand up, I think, over the last 2 months, and being able to feed students lunch and breakfast, as you said, Yvonne, without asking for any sort of identification or income verification, has been amazing. What that suggests is, well, if we can feed 1 million students 1 million meals in 2 months, then why can't we have universal breakfast and lunch? Obviously, we can do it. The capacity is there. The question is again funding. It's taken quite an infusion of money to be able to do that. And so the question is how we would fund that. I think the same goes with the devices and connectivity. We were not a one-to-one district before this pandemic. In the schools, we were one-to-one, and any student while in school had access to a device, but not to take home. And so we've been able to stand that up in a pretty brief amount of time. But that also takes funding as well. And again, as we've talked earlier about the budget, we may see a bit of a recession over the next 2 years. as we move forward. At least we look at the indicators that our economists are looking at. So, but these things I think create huge opportunities for us and things to think about going forward. And last, with the social emotional learning, we know what students are dealing with and facing every day. I would suspect that when students come back, be it August, be it September, be it in 2021, we'll be dealing with new kinds of trauma in addition to what we already see in terms of trauma in our students. And so we've got to have the personnel in the buildings to be able to deal with that, both, I think, from a medical standpoint, as we're seeing these strange new diseases coming up now in our young students in New York and other places as a result of COVID, as well as the emotional and social, emotional, and mental challenges as well. And at the end of the day, we've got to be prepared as a district and as a school system, both with nurses and with counselors, to be able to handle what we're going to see in this post-COVID era.
So a couple of follow-ups on that, because and some of this is from questions tonight, but also from Facebook questions we've had. In terms of the suggestion is that this universal feeding nutrition program, it might be a great opportunity to partner with the county commissioners, since county commissioners have two major jobs, really, to fund public schools and to handle human services. And since they're one of the portals where they have a lot of responsibility for what happens when people become homeless, people lose their jobs, people don't have, need mental health services and public health services. So the comments are just more of a comment than a question, but wouldn't this be a great one area where you really could partner with the county on saying, this meets your goals and our goals. We want kids who can pay attention because they've been fed in class, and you want to help be economically supporting families who are struggling with food insecurity and these kind of things. So that's more of a comment.
I absolutely agree with that. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And because that's kind of where you have a Venn diagram that crosses over. And then the second comment was, shouldn't every school have a food pantry? Another way that the county commissioners could work with you, isn't this a place where parents and families show up at? And I know that Backpack Buddies, which I'm a big fan of, is very strong in our elementary schools. But this question is more like in middle schools, or at least in high schools, shouldn't we have more pantries, and what can the public do and the commissioners do to help you?
I think through this whole food security of the county and the school system together, they've made quite a bond already and I hope we keep that very solid. I, for one, as a school board member, would really want that to continue. So I think the one good thing about the COVID, but there is some things that we have learned through that's good for us. And food security is one of those areas that the county and the school system work really well together on. And that should continue. So I see all kinds of avenues opening there, as long as we get community support to help us and business support, because it will not be inexpensive. But it's needed.
Didn't you and the county already achieve universal breakfast?
You mean like with what? With during the COVID?
No. The county, don't they already have a universal breakfast?
They have a universal breakfast policy. Yes, they do, and it is based on the need in the schools. But I don't think it hits everybody that it should. But it can as long as we identify and get it into the school. But it can be funded.
And here's another question about utilizing having more people in the building. They're saying when you have your bus drivers who are already trained and how to the school system's policies and procedures and working with children, couldn't they be used during the day to be people that help clean, people who help monitor the hallways to make sure that kids are acting okay in the bathrooms or with the hand sanitizer station?
I like that.
Couldn't they be used to help monitor health, like when kids aren't doing well and the parents are coming to pick them up, they have to stay with someone?
Yeah.
So they're saying like one way to keep bus drivers is make them full-time jobs with benefits, and couldn't we use them in between the routes to be really hands-on in the school with cleaning,
I like that.
and healthcare.
I like that. I like that. Yes. I think that's a good idea, Keith.
Well,
Use the bus driver full time. It won't cost anything, but then we sure could do that. I'm actually not, I think that's a great way to spend our money, is to give them full-time jobs and have them have, because they're great relationship builders. We know that.
Yeah.
You might attract more bus drivers that way.
You might.
Well, or keep them, right? You could certainly keep them if they were during the day, once they finish their routes, and they would then be assigned to a school where they could actually be helped. Because I think that I've heard all of you speaking, as Lynn has, at your work sessions and on the media. And Keith, thank you for the weekly updates. They have been wonderful. I think that what we know is we got to have more people in the building. Teachers are going to be struggling to deal with all the things in their classroom and their remote days and not remote days and instructional, and more people in the building to make sure the kids are washing their hands, or if they're not feeling well, I mean, all of these things, talking to kids, helping out with the grab and go foods. It seems like a wonderful way to treat our bus drivers what they've always wanted, is a full-time job with benefits. So
I like it.
yeah.
I mean, we need to relook at the budget, Keith. We need to relook at the budget. That might be a different line item that needs to get in there quickly.
Uh-oh, we're getting you guys in trouble.
I like that. You always do.
So Lynn, do you see any other questions quickly? Let us scan here and see if we've missed anybody else. Any other questions?
I think we've gotten all the questions, but with your suggestion about making bus drivers full-time, and the title of this slide that we're looking at is called Reopening School, I'm going to give Yvonne the floor to give Public Schools First a little plug. We actually have a webinar series called Reopening When Schools Reopen, and have you done 2 of those webinars so far?
We've done 2, Lynn. Thank you very much for
we have
letting me.
We have 2 upcoming. We have one tomorrow night, tomorrow night, the 21st, and then another one next week. And then we also have Bill Fletcher with us next week. So we want to tell people about that webinar too. So I'll give you the floor to talk about those.
Okay, so let me talk really quickly about tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we have Chris Nordstrom joining us from NC Justice. He's going to give us a quick look at the budget, what budget bills are coming up. We have Lindsay Wagner with the Public School Forum. He's going to be talking a little bit about some of the impacts of this on the Leandro case that we're expecting to hear back from the judge in early June. And then we have Monica Johnson-Hostler, who is on your school board. He's going to be joining us tomorrow night to talk a little bit about the things we're talking about. But I've asked her specifically to look at the CDC decision tree. Y'all may have remembered that the Center for Disease Control this week put out a chart saying if you answer yes to this and yes to this and yes to this, you should open your school. But if you have any no's along the way, you should not. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation tomorrow night. And then last, we'll be joined by Dr. Terrence Ruth, who has been a teacher, been a principal, and now is a parent of a child in the Wake County Public School System. So we'll get some parent perspective and teacher perspective, school board perspective, and 2 policy analysts who are working on this a lot. So tomorrow night is going to be really a great webinar. You have to register to attend, so please register. And then Lynn mentioned that next week on the 26th of May, we have Bill Fletcher. Bill Fletcher served in the school board back with Roxie one time before, and now they're both back again. I served with Roxie and Bill, and so I know that these are people who have a long history of understanding what's going on in the school. And Bill's going to be talking about facilities. He's going to be giving us an update on where we're at now, what's opening next year, what's being delayed. From the county commissioners have made proposals to delay some of the spending for the facilities. The public wants to understand that might be well and fine. So Lynn's got a lot of questions lined up to ask Bill to answer next week. So if you're interested in what's going on facilities, please join us for that webinar. And remember that facilities, as we've talked about tonight, right, Keith, are more than just building new buildings. they're going in and making sure that all the bathrooms work now and all the hot water. We have to, someone told me yesterday that they did a survey in I don't want to say the county, but it's close to us, to their schools, and over half of their bathroom faucets did not have hot running water. Okay. And then a lot, 25% more had just where you put your hand under it and it goes for 5 seconds. You know, and we're talking about washing hands. And so they're saying that they want to use some of their capital money for retrofitting some of their schools for to handle some of these events, as well as dividing walls and plexiglass for secretaries and, you know, cafeteria workers. So I think that that's something we'll be pushing Bill on. How are we going to be able to use some of this for, and hand dispensers, putting things on walls? Those are all infrastructure and could be capital monies. But so we'll be doing that. So we're really excited about that.
I would argue that we can use CARES money for that kind of stuff, so that we use our capital money to focus on new schools and renovations.
Good point.
I know. You know what I was trying to do? I'm trying to get the commissioners not to cut your allotment for your capital. I'm trying to make a case for you now.
We can use all of it, huh?
Yeah, and I do want to end before Lynn shuts me off here and does a wrap up. I want to say that overwhelmingly, you guys are getting gold stars for coming on and talking and asking questions, and for saying, you know, telling as much as you know. People know that you don't have all the final answers, but they're really worried and concerned. And the more we tell them, the more updates you give. I think it calms people to see this progress being made. And the comments are very nice. That thank you for listening and asking for our opinion.
Well, thank you to both of you for doing this. I mean, this is very helpful, and all the information you guys are getting out through this forum is very helpful. Thank you very, very much.
Lynn, I'll let you close up.
Yvonne sort of took my comments. I was going to say that by and large, by far, we are getting more positive feedback about the way the school system is handling this. It really is just a monumental task to, you know, change to this online learning, to address the cleaning concerns, to address those facility concerns, and to absolutely address these impending budget decisions. So by and large, the comments and the feedback that we get is very positive and encouraging. And we, you know that many in the community send you much encouragement and support as you navigate these really rough waters. And I want to thank you both for coming back. You were just with us a couple weeks ago, and we really appreciate that you took your evening to be back with us. We know you've got plenty on your plates, including, I can't imagine how many Zoom calls and meetings. And I know Roxie runs around to all the food distribution sites. So we know you're busy, and we really appreciate your time.
And
Thanks for having us.
I thank you both. And I would say, as we're ending here, I want to encourage everyone who is with us tonight and who listens to the recording of this, the budget is extremely important. We have 2 weeks to have public comments starting tomorrow. Lynn will be posting this on social media many times over the next few days, but you look for tomorrow, go to the Facebook page. She'll be tweeting and posting and getting that information out there. This is the time. It could not be any easier, right, Roxie? You don't have to go, you don't have to show up. You don't have to pay for parking. You don't have to get dressed. You can literally stay at home and enter your comments in the portal. Lynn and I were told today, and I want to share that with you, that you certainly are welcome to call commissioners or leave them messages or email them, but that will not be a part of the public record. To be a part of the public record, you have to go to the website that Lynn will be sharing and enter, email, type in your comments into that portal. That will be attached as minutes to the public hearing. And I think it's important. I think that's important to be on record and have public comment.
It is important to do that, but I don't want to mislead if you send an email to the commissioners, that is public record. But we really need to keep these public comments about the budget more focused and use that portal that they're offering for those budget comments. Would you agree with that, Yvonne?
Well, they're public record, but they're only public if you request them. So that's
Right.
really the hard process. So to the public record, Lynn, thanks for saying that, because I need to make that distinction. I'm really trying to say it's part of the minutes. Maybe I should say it that way, that if you go through the portal, it'll be attached as minutes for the meetings, which then are public.
Okay.
And county staff did say on Monday during that meeting that the comments on the budget will be visible for the public to see. So that's another reason that to use that portal. And again, we will post that link multiple times, but that won't happen until tomorrow when we get the link.
That's great. That's awesome.
And so the closing comment on that, I would say, is that we saw that during the recession, we took steps back and we made a lot of drastic cuts, and it harmed children. The data show that it harmed our children. And so I'm hoping that folks who are listening will know that we have to be a little bold now, and we have to step out, and I hope we will, to provide the support our public schools need, because, you know, these children are only in the first grade, the second grade, the fifth grade, the 10th grade once. And we want to, and we've had a tough year. We want next year to be brilliant and beautiful, and we need to have fun that. So y'all know the drill here at the end. We were asking you to help Lynn and I by liking us on Facebook, following us on Twitter, go to our YouTube channel. We have some wonderful recorded videos and webinars there. And to stay connected. The more we're connected, the more we can share information with you, and the more we can stay strong, because what we want to do is support public education so that it can deliver what our Constitution says, to deliver every child a fair, equitable, high-quality education, regardless of any of their demographics, especially their race, their gender, their income, or their zip code. So thank y'all tonight for joining us, and thank you, Lynn, for organizing this. And to all of our guests, thank you, and stay engaged.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.